back to football and life, I guess, right now. A big talking point is about football and whether football should be continuing at the kind of lower levels of Scottish football or it should be stopped. We ran a poll on the Twitter a few days ago. We had over 500 votes, and the results were, to me, quite surprising, to be honest. It was 46.5% in favour of shutting down football, and 53.5% saying no, football should continue. I expected that result, to be quite honest, to be quite significantly in favour of football continuing. So there's obviously a bit of a groundswell for having football stop. So just to put everyone in a bit of background, football obviously has been given professional status at all levels, from the Premiership right down to Tier 7 in Scottish football. Therefore, professional football is allowed to continue as per the Scottish Government guidelines. And I believe the scientists and experts out there are saying that it's okay for football to continue. So there's been a lot of discussion, shall we say, on social media. So I'll fling over to Derek, who will give us some thoughts on the topic.
So this could be a long one, so I'll try and keep it as succinct as possible. But my personal opinion is, and I think John Dodds, who a lot of us will know for BSC, said it right. We've been guided by the science the whole way up to now. Why would we change to being opinion-based at this point? Ultimately, the guidance has came out for the government and, by extension, the SFA, to say that all professional pyramid football can continue. So, by extension, that's tiers 1 to 7. As long as the protocols are followed, and they have been tightened in recent times. So why wouldn't we keep going? Like, I don't understand. There's certainly a couple of individuals with media influence at the minute who seem to have a vendetta to get football suspended for one reason or another. And it is perfectly legitimate to suggest that tiers 2 to 7 are shut down, or suspended, I should say, because we are not doing testing. But what's really rankled me in the past kind of few days is voices that they're going to shut down on league when we're playing exactly the same way and doing exactly the same protocols as the Championship League from the League 2. So it's all or nothing. You suspend all of that and let the Premiership go, or you let us all continue. It's simple as that. And I'll throw them to you guys and we can jump on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that front. I think it'll be, as you say, guided by the science at the beginning. Perhaps there might be an argument for the whole professional status thing being maybe not the right phrase to use for the clubs. But if you do look at the teams, certainly the lower leagues, they are, as you say, going about their business the same kind of way as any club at League 2 or League 1. And so I firmly believe it. While we obviously don't have, there hasn't been a lot of stats, I guess, around COVID positive cases just now, but certainly I haven't heard any major stories about clubs that have had any major issues with COVID, certainly from whether that's training or in matches. I think a lot of people have talked about some things like kind of the NHS could do without sports injury admissions at hospitals. Now, yeah, there's probably an argument for that, but let's be honest, how many people week to week at probably Championship down to Tier 7 go to hospital straight after a match? There's probably only maybe one every couple of weeks, maybe, or something like that. Most are dealt with by physios at their clubs or kind of through rest and physio and kind of club experts who are in that kind of profession. So there's not probably going to be a massive demand. They're all of a sudden going to turn up with like 50 folk from football turning up with twisted ankles and pulled hamstrings and stuff like that, and that's not how it works. So that opinion for me is rubbish. I don't see where people are getting that idea from, first and foremost. I don't know. The second thing, I think a lot of the opinions are coming from people who are not at football matches. I think all four of us can speak for being at matches this season and watching teams follow protocols and making sure that everyone's sticking to the guidance, 2 metres apart, face mask, temperature checks. All these things are taking place. And that's probably the reason why there's not been massive outbreaks at our level, because you'll probably find that even down the lower leagues that they're actually following the guidance better than some of the clubs in say the SPFL Championship Premiership, wherever. I think if you look at Kilmarnock and St Mirren, they were obviously having fucking dinner at their table with each other and passing COVID around the club that way. And I'm a Kilmarnock fan, and I was really gutted to see that happen. But I think you look at you probably see at that level they're taking kind of liberties because maybe they are testing. You think, well, it's okay. We don't need to do the rules as much, follow the rules as much. So I think it's pretty strict, and I think a lot of the discussion now has been around kind of financial support as well for clubs, where I think they've been told that if you don't follow the protocols at that level, you might not get the money from the SFA and the government. So I think that's a massive point for clubs as well. The last thing you want to be is a club that doesn't get 15, 20 grand from the government because you didn't follow the protocols, because ultimately that's going to have to pay your players, keep you the running of the club and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of these opinions from me are just from people who don't understand how the football is actually working at our level.
Just before we go any further, I kind of forgot to say, but I think it's important to do so. I kind of feel insulted on behalf of the guys that are responsible for implementing the protocols all through non-league and lower league football and SPFL, because I can speak for the games I've been to. Obviously, you guys, you mentioned we've all been to games this year and we're in that fortunate position, but the reason that we haven't had any major issues, and there's been an occasional one here or there, is because of these people who are in charge, the COVID safety guys. And I think it's frankly insulting, a lot of the things that have been said by certain media people this week. It feels like it's open season because basically Celtic going to Dubai's just left it an easy target for football to have kind of people have a go at it. But when you've got factories continually working and you've got construction sites still working, the idea that having 40 folk, up to 50 folk gather for football with fantastic protocols in place and these people making sure that everything is followed to the letter, that football is not the big issue here for the spread of COVID, let's be honest. If it was, we would have seen several more outbreaks and the government would have said, no, you're not doing it. Premiership only with our testing. But I do feel as if it's this kind of idea, oh, you're just a wee team, you're non-league, who cares? You know, there's a lot of snobbery going about. And I think it's an insult to the people that are doing really good work at these clubs.
I've heard a few arguments back and forward. I've seen a few arguments back and forward on various group chats, and I wouldn't dismiss any of the things that a lot of people have said. A lot of them, as you say, are based on opinions and maybe no with all the facts in possession. The one that I think that holds the most water for me is a lot of these players are they're semi-professional. They've got other jobs today, and if they were to catch COVID whilst playing football, and they wouldn't be able to work and earn a living, and I think that's probably the most valid argument. But I can only echo what you're saying, Derek. The games that I've been to, and again, we'll say well, we're lucky in the position that we can still get to games where a lot of people can't. But every game I've been to, the COVID protocols have been adhered to as strictly as they possibly could be. The guys at the clubs that are putting these protocols in place are doing the absolute best that they can do. And I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times I've looked and thought, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, mate. Everything else, I think, has been followed as strictly and as rigorously as it possibly can be.
I think that's it. I think there is always going to be kind of slip-ups and like let your guard down. That's going to happen in society no matter where you are, and that's not going to be specific to football. I think a lot of the people that maybe have the argument, like you were saying there, Derek, about factories and construction work, are probably the people that are saying the football should shut down. Because I think it gets to that point where when society shuts down, like your restaurants and your gyms, then the things that are left open are just the things that people want to talk about. So just now, for example, construction work is open, factories are open, shops are open, supermarkets are open, and football's on, as examples. So I think that's the thing. I think there's nothing else to talk about. So some of these journalists and things like that who are piping up stories day in, day out online are just doing it to grab headlines and to get people talking and trying to just cover themselves and keep themselves on a job, quite frankly. But I feel I just feel like they don't know what they're talking about a lot of the time, and they're not doing it, as you say, with the full facts. And I think we can make arguments for things like, well, I think you said at the start there, Derek, about the testing. I think we can maybe shut down football who's not testing, but that's fine if we had money and we could do testing, but we can't, and we haven't had many outbreaks, so I don't see why we have to shut it down. I think it was even the first minister herself said that football was been allowed to kind of give people kind of bit of entertainment and kind of feel a connection to football, because I think we've all been involved in media and clubs, and we're live streaming games, and you see the joy that brings to people on a Saturday, because they can still watch their team. I mean, speaking from my own experience at Colin, we've probably had 200, 250 people watching most of our games on the live stream. That's probably not much away from our normal attendance at a match. So it shows you the fans are still wanting to connect and still want to be with the club. They're on our YouTube watching videos, and they're on Facebook and commenting and all that kind of stuff. They still want to be connected to the club, and that's what's important for me, is the fact that there's going to be that's something to maybe live for. There's people out there who probably the only thing they have is football, and if the only way they're going to get to see right now is by watching it on the live streams and following on social media, then it gives them something to live for. So I think there's a big argument for the mental health of fans and the football players themselves, because I think a lot of players will be lost. And ultimately, I think, Kev, you mentioned there about the players who maybe are working other jobs. I think that argument is fair, absolutely. But I think that's up to the players themselves to make that decision and that judgment as adults, if they can decide, is it right for them to play football because they might not be able to work and things like that. And that's fully up to them. That's not up for football to decide if the guy who's a bricklayer decides that he doesn't want to do his, might not be able to work on a weekday because he's got COVID. So I think the arguments for football being cancelled are few and far between compared to what the arguments for to stay right now, certainly.
I'm actually disappointed. I thought you guys were going to rant and save me from doing it, but I guess we'll go.
Take the floor, Chris, take the floor.
Yeah, some of the articles, it's dated opinions. Like the thing that you mentioned there, Ben, about obviously the NHS could do without sports injuries. I mean, it's no the 70s where players are kicking the shit out of each other, you know what I mean? And some of the stuff that's been said is just not true. Like, a lot of the guys don't do football for a living. We'll tell that to guys like Dougie Samuel at Spartans, Chris Geddes at Stirling Uni. There is guys that do it for a living. I think the whole viewpoint of some of the guys is just absolutely dated. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 years at the date, but like it's not true in what some of the guys are saying. You know what I mean? And this whole idea that SFA is under pressure to suspend, it's just bullshit. It honestly is. I mean, 2 of 17 Lowland League teams have called, their concerns, which they've got every right to do as a league, or, I mean, even managers, you obviously have a duty of care to your players. I mean, you have to listen to their concerns, but, phrases like increasing pressure and all this, it's following a narrative that does not exist. And we talked about, obviously, testing. The reason we're not testing is because it's not financially viable to do so. But for me, the clubs have been on point. We've talked about protocols. Oh, well, there's no evidence to suggest there's been outbreaks because there's no testing. But there has been COVID cases in football, and the clubs have dealt with it absolutely perfectly, getting the guys to isolate, going through track and trace. It's like what you said, Derek. It's a massive slap in the face to all the people that have put in time and effort for protocols to be safe for their players, the managers. I mean, that is outrageous to suggest that for whatever reason football needs to be stopped because either the COVID cases are too much or to me it's a slap in the face, because to me it's kind of like they're saying, oh well, you just can't deal with it, despite there not being any evidence that there has been COVID cases being spread out throughout football. And one thing we've probably not touched on is the fact that mental health as well. I think you did touch on it a wee bit there, Ben, but I mean, we've had 3 young footballers recently kill themselves. I know the feeling between managers and players, because they message the Catchup and say, hey, these are my feelings, blah blah blah. They do it willingly, and there is a lot of concern if football was to stop again, if it was for 3 weeks, a month. That's another thing we obviously need to get into. But like, if it does get stopped, when where do we draw the line? If we're no further forward in March, where do we continue the season? Do we scrap the season? I mean, it's a nightmare at the moment, and I would hate to be anyone that's in charge of this, but I have to call out people shitting on this level, and that to me that's what people have done, especially in the media, and people that don't really understand. If they've not been to football games, they'll not understand how good the protocols are. I know there's been some people, oh well, I've been to a game, and this they've not been as fair play as other clubs, but well, call it out. You know what I mean? Call it out. Don't just like generalise it, assume that everyone's bad and that one club's not bad at doing protocols and everyone is. You know what I mean? And it's the same for. I can only go with what I've seen and what you guys obviously have seen as well. I think the protocols are on point. But yeah, I mean, this is how serious obviously clubs are taking it. East Stirlingshire recently released Andy Rogers for it's in the news obviously, so I think it's fair game to talk about it, due to potentially breaking COVID rules. But yeah, I just don't understand the whole idea that football at this level has to be shut when they're not even testing. I mean, there's people advocating, only the Premiership and the Championship. Well, there's only one team testing in the Championship, so we need to shut the Championship as well.
The SFA are going to step in and make a decision for a start is absolute nonsense, because they will do anything in their power to avoid upsetting anyone. We know for the way they're led that they don't have a spine, let's be honest. That area of things anyway. So they will defer to the government, as they did with the whole Celtic question as well. When the question got brought up about who approved it, they basically went, the government did, even though that's not technically true. So don't look to the SFA to step in here and say, by the way, tiers 2 to 7 you're shutting down. It would be a Scottish government decision that would make that happen, if it is going to happen.
I think just to counter that, I think though that the government have kind of said it's up to football, so I think we're at that stalemate where the SFA are saying, well, it's the government will decide, and the government are saying that's not our position to decide whether football continues. So if you've got that, and as you say, if you don't have any spine at all in the SFA, which we've seen over the last 9, 12 months, 3 years, whatever you want to call it, certainly I don't think we'll get to that point. I certainly think in terms of decisions to suspend it will be up to the leagues themselves, and rather than the SFA. I think it would need to take some sort of kind of group of league body to decide whether or not that league specifically should shut down for a certain amount of time. But for me, I still just haven't seen anything that says it deserves to be shut down. How many people, for example, have actually caught COVID by playing a match? If you've caught COVID at football, it's probably been because you've been either sharing a car with someone, or you've been training, or you've been kind of grouping up at a team kind of meeting or whatever. It's not been from match to team versus team kind of transferability. I've yet to hear that story in any part of football, whether that's the Premiership in England or at our level. So the argument for matches being cancelled is just silly, quite frankly.
If the government and the government scientists were saying we don't think you should be playing football, there's a risk of spreading the virus or whatever, then obviously that's a game changer. And if players were coming out and saying, I didn't feel safe playing the game, I feel like I'm at risk, then again, you can't ignore that. Yeah. But I mean, if the government's happy for it to go ahead and the players are happy to continue playing, then to me it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, we kind of touched on it a wee bit, but the idea that football does give people a wee bit of joy through this time, of course it does. I mean, we kind of talk every day about footballs through DMs. My stepdad, we chat about football, not so much Lowland League or that, but the Premiership, and football is, like you said, Ben. Some people only have football at the moment. You know what I mean? Because they've maybe lost their job or. And this idea that I noticed another thing in one of these articles that, it could be the argument could be made for the Premiership and the Championship, but not for the lower leagues. It's like, well, hold on. It's like I'm actually really enjoying getting to games through Spartans and doing media. If I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be with football. So you're completely wrong in that instance. If you think it's just about Rangers or Celtic or whoever, it's fucking bullshit. I'm going to call it out because we all work with lower league teams, and like you said earlier, Ben, like where would we be without for something to do on a Saturday? And we're in a fortunate position to be able to do it. But, you know, to be able to provide streams and stuff like that, we're obviously trying our best. But there is a lot of people that would be lost without football. And to just say that it's only important to Premiership or Championship fans is just, it's not on at all.
And just to back that up, at one point with the BSC games that we've put live at, obviously Twitch, I wouldn't say is that well known a website, but we've had over 500 folk at points, like watching a BSC game. You know, it's an absolute nonsense to say. I believe the actual quote was like some along the lines of who cares about Thornton Hibs v Nistale Wanderers? And you're like, I mean, get the silver spoon at your backside. Like, quite frankly, I think quite a lot of folk would rather watch that than a repeat Rangers Aberdeen, just to call it a game that's happening this weekend. Like, there's so much snobbery still built into football in this country, be it through not necessarily the fan bases, but the media, the talking heads, or that kind of thing. People still don't realise that there's relegation for League Two in the media, which is mind-blowing. Like, you hear it in the Scottish Cup games that we talked about earlier on, just that kind of a wee plucky Linlithgow Rose, wee plucky Bonnyrigg Rose. There's so much ignorance, I think's the right word, that it's just mind-blowing. Side note, just before I forget as well, I think we need to say a massive well done to Stirlingshire as well, because it's a really tough decision they took, and fair play to them, because we said about being spineless earlier on. That's one thing Shire certainly aren't. You can tell there. So fair play to them for making the tough goal.
Yeah, I think that's your spot on there, Moza. I think, especially given the player who it was also a player assistant manager and Andy Rodgers, and for your manager decided that that's what has to happen, because there has been issues around COVID protocols and kind of not stopping things happen and calling out when they've seen it. So I think you're absolutely right, and fair play to Stirlingshire. I know they've had a few issues with COVID at the beginning of the season, certainly. So they've also got that on their mind because of that as well. And I think, yeah, fair play. However, I have seen Kelty have picked up Andy Rodgers, I believe, just recently.
Picked him up instantly, aye. Which is a very Kelty move to, there's a strong player for a rival, let's grab him.
Any comment, Kev?
Kev, over to you.
He's not going anywhere else now, then. That's the main thing, I suppose. I was a wee bit surprised when I saw it, and as you say, it is a fairly Kelty move to snap somebody like that up as soon as they come on the market. Whether it is because they want them in their ranks, or whether it's just to stop somebody else signing them, then everybody just has to have their own opinion on that.
One thing, do you think Stirlingshire missed a trick? They could have maybe got a transfer fee for him?
They probably weren't thinking about that though, were they? I think they were absolutely adamant that he'd done wrong and he had to go. And I think trying to maybe flog a player this time, the teams really have money to be spending on players? Probably not. I think every penny's a prisoner right now. Obviously, it is normally in these sort of levels of football, but certainly just now we'd expect them probably struggling to sign. I think Kelty are probably the only team that probably would have maybe paid money for him if they really needed him. But have they maybe picked him up because he is on a free, and he's, as Kev says, he doesn't go to a rival at that point, so he will put him on the bench perhaps and maybe give him a game or two. And he keeps somebody like, I don't know, Bonnyrigg or BSC, for example. Doesn't strengthen them, so that's a possible situation.
I mean, if that story broke and he hadn't left Shire and Shire were saying, we want a transfer fee from him, they would have been savaged. So I think they've done the right thing.
It's all about integrity, really. Yeah. I think there was a similar thing with Celtic with Bongoli right at the start of the season, and there was a lot of talk about him going somewhere else and stuff like that. To me, if you want to keep your integrity and it's all about doing the right thing and stuff like that, then you just get rid of the guy and you didn't try and hold it for a transfer fee of any kind.
Yeah, and one thing we always have to say is the club comes before anyone, really. It has to, and I think some of the fans weren't happy that Andy's went to Kelty, but you can't really criticise Andy. He's obviously went to a team that's challenging. I would have probably hurt some of the guys at Shire, but it's a difficult situation. But Andy has to think about himself as well in terms of offers and whatnot. So it's a weird one. I mean, of all the teams that he could have went to, I probably wouldn't have thought he would have went to Kelty, but we obviously wish him luck. We'll move on to, I guess, the second part of this, Dalbeattie Star. And what they're saying, absolutely no issues with what they're saying. We've obviously talked about it a wee bit. Even if Richie Maxwell didn't feel the way his players do, I mean, we've talked about responsibility, duty of care for his players. He has to take them concerns on board. I feel like I need to defend but also criticise Dalbeattie Star, which is a bit of a weird thing. I'm going to defend them on one point, and that's the fact that people are saying, oh, well, they're only doing it to not get relegated, which is honestly bullshit in my opinion, because they could have withdrawn from the league 3 weeks ago. So that's not true. The one thing I will criticise them on, and I think you touched on it, Ben, was the fact that they mentioned, well, I'll read from their statement, we are classed as elite professional players, but no provision is available for COVID testing at our level. We do, however, query the professional status as we are a part-time club and all players have careers out with football. I think that is a terrible way to make a point, because you are absolutely shitting on other clubs. That the professional status is the only thing that is allowing the Lowland League, the West of Scotland, East of Scotland, South of Scotland to be playing right now. And the fact that they've brought that up, I think, is not a very good thing. I think they could have pointed to the other things that they've mentioned, obviously, the fact that Dumfries and Galloway is now sort of higher tier and they're worried about the COVID transmission and stuff like that. I don't think they've made a lot of friends, and they've probably burnt a few bridges by bringing that sort of thing into it, because they've been happy up until now to play under the professional status, and now, we're querying it now because we want football to be suspended. I don't think that's a really good move, and it's not my job to come on here and criticise one of the member clubs of the Lowland League, but I feel that it's a bit of a low blow, and obviously it's been put in front of Nicola Sturgeon, and it just looks bad on the league. And the fact that, you know, they make the point about Dumfries and Galloway, but Queen of the South and Annan Athletic are continuing to play. Why are people just calling for Dalbeattie Star to be suspended or whatever? And that worries me in another sense, and I'm sure you'll agree, Derek, but League Two, if we stopped at Lowland League, the League Two will just shut.
I wouldn't even worry about the League Two trapdoor, because as far as I'm concerned, if we close down, League Two closes down. Everything up Championship we closes down. And there cannot be any justification for that not happening. But in terms of, look, I feel like too much is put in that word professional when we talk about professional status and the elite professional status, because all that is saying is you're a club that potentially can go all the way up the pyramid. Simple as that, you're licensed. There's too much stock put in that word professional. But here's the issue I've got with what Dalbeattie said in their statement. You can't have your cake and eat it. You want all this funding for hardship for the Scottish Government, for the SFA. You want your Scottish Cup entry every year. You want potential extra funding through the licensing, up to 10 grand a year for facilities grants and so on. You can't have that and then say, aye, but we're a wee team that all our guys have got real jobs. If you want that, you can drop down to the South of Scotland League. And that might sound harsh, but as far as I'm concerned, you either take what comes with the status that you've been delighted to take, that gets you that Scottish Cup entry, gets you all the benefits of it, or if you don't want that, then find your level and be happy with it. You know, it's as you say, Chris, it's an argument that's going to impact in other clubs as well, because it's something we've fought for and strove for so long. And you've now got teams that have joined the West of Scotland League in order to join that rank, to have that opportunity to progress and get the Scottish Cup entry or that kind of thing. But it's just frustrating that that's the argument I've chosen, because, as Kev said earlier on, the argument about players and welfare is extremely important. Like, if the players, and I've seen a few of them actually come out and say it, including Diggs, but if the players have worries, then surely that's the way you aim the statement. You don't aim it at that, surely.
And the thing about Dumfries and Galloway being on a different tier, and obviously there's issues with hospital capacity, and there is concerns. I mean, you would be mad not to have concerns at the moment. But the problem is they've been happy to travel to tiers 3 and 4 out now throughout the season as well. So I mean, I hate like getting on at Dalbeattie because I get on with a lot of the guys. Hopefully, I don't fall out with any of them. But the problem is, I mean, it goes. We have to think when we do a podcast on the Lowland League or East of Scotland, we have to try and take everyone's view. And could you imagine if we suspended the season and Kelty or East Kilbride could not get promoted due to it? I mean, what would their reaction be because of Dalbeattie's? You know, we have to think about everyone. And at the moment, only 2 out of 17 clubs have raised concerns, and that's why I have an issue with the whole mounting pressure phrase that's been used at the moment.
Side note, it was only about 3 weeks ago that Dalbeattie and Tier 2 were arguing for fans to return to games.
Exactly. That was my next point there as well, Derek. I think they've been in a more fortunate position than all of us for quite some time. They've been looking at tier 2 in the 4-tier system, and they've had kind of the luxuries of being able to do things a wee bit more normal than perhaps some of us in the Central Belt who have been tier 4 or tier 3 for the last God knows how long it feels like at this point. And I think that's the thing. I think maybe that's the concern is that somehow football is going to drive that the cases up, and I just don't think that's going to be the case. So I don't understand why they're continually going on about it. And I think going back to the thing about Dumfries and Galloway, I think it's just massive hypocrisy. If you're like desperate for Dalbeattie shut down, but you've got Queen of the South, you've got Annan, whoever else is down in the kind of that region as well, still playing. Stranraer's at another team that have been playing. I'm not quite maybe in Dumfries and Galloway, but they're all playing in it, and they're all been in the same boat, I feel like. So, fair enough if you want to shout that message out for that whole region, fair play. But I don't see Queen of the South or Annan or anything like that coming out and being desperate for the leagues to shut down. I think we talked about the South of Scotland. They probably will shut down, I think. But that's been their course kind of throughout. They've been a bit maybe more hesitant about playing in the past. So, fair play. If that's what they want to do and that's the decision they make, then no one's going to judge them for making a decision not to play. But this constant thing about trying to get things shut down because for the teams who want to play and the leagues that want to play, I've seen in the West myself, the 5 teams in the West Premiership that haven't played this year are desperate to shut down or see football shut down at all turns, and it's like, just let us get on with it. If we start having full breakouts in teams and COVID's rife within every club in Scottish football, then yeah, it's quite likely let's shut it down. But right now we're not at that stage, so let's continue. Let's follow the science instead of coming up with these mad opinions, and we'll hopefully see football through till the end of the year.
We actually had, we've probably been making the same arguments as we did at the start of the season with the West of Scotland, but I think the West of Scotland are pretty much continuing until they've been told otherwise. Obviously, Mabel, came out with
Mabel in the West, they're desperate to shut down for whatever reason, because they've been very, very quiet about it for so long, and all of a sudden they've piped up. And I don't know if it's just the manager's opinion or it's the whole board and committee or at Mabel, but in terms of I said earlier, they're desperate. Teams are not playing are desperate to shut down, and I don't understand why. It's that thing about shitting on other teams and the teams who want to try. Granted, like in the West, there's no promotion relegation, which I don't agree with, but apart from obviously potentially in the Prem with teams who can get a licence, but I don't get it. I think there's a desperation. I guess it's like that thing, maybe like, want to say, "Oh, I told you so," sort of thing, and prove that justifying their own reasons for not playing. I think we've talked about this plenty of times in this podcast about the fact that teams are playing because of, or not playing rather because of air quotes, player welfare and all sorts of things, because they can't get a shower and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, we know the reasons. It's all about money, and that's what it is. We've seen players in the West who have surprisingly went on loan to our teams in the West and into Lowland League and things like that. That certainly a couple of players that I'm aware of that were or allegedly players who said they didn't want to play for player welfare reasons are now all of a sudden out of loan on teams. So I find that a wee bit bizarre and hypocritical, but I think they should just let us play those who want to play, and those who don't, and that's as simple as that.
Yeah, down to the individual, and it is 50-50, I think, amongst opinion, as we noticed on the poll. But at the moment, the West of Scotland's happy to continue. The East of Scotland have been a wee bit quiet, actually. I've not seen anything from the clubs of that. Obviously, the South of Scotland are looking to suspend, I would suspect. But yeah, I mean, what does it say about the Lowland League also if they were to suspend and the West of Scotland, tier below them, is carrying on it?
I think ultimately in that case, I think like the Lowland League and the West will probably do the same thing. I think there's maybe a few people there that are involved in the IMG and the West of Scotland League, and also involved in the Lowland League. So I certainly would expect them to follow suit in that regard. And I think the overwhelming desire is let's play football. So we'll do that until something miraculous happens. And as I said before, if we get loads of cases and football gets shut down, no one's going to be upset about that. Ultimately, we'll agree. Well, maybe we'll be unhappy, but we're not going to be like annoyed or raging about it, because we know that the right thing deep down is to shut it down at that point. But now we're nowhere near that stage, so we continue on.
It's a totally different situation to where we were last March, which is the other argument that keeps getting brought up, that last March we were up against a virus that we didn't really understand, and we didn't have any kind of protocols in place. Where we are now, there's a vaccine beginning to get rolled out. There's actually 3 of them now getting rolled out. So that's the other argument. It doesn't hold any water, as far as I'm concerned. That, as we've said the whole way through, let's keep getting guided by the science and let folk actually know what they're talking about, rather than people like us on Twitter make the decision.
Right. Yeah. Get all these Facebook scientists away and let the real people with qualifications and experience tell us how it is. That's what I'm going to say on that matter.